Okay, I'm going to again be sharing so much with you today, and I hope you can buckle down and buckle your seatbelts, because this sighting is just so amazing. Not only in the hard data, as I mentioned, which I'm going to be sharing today, but also in how it affected participants, experiencers at a very, very deep level. And that's one of the components that's dear to my heart, actually, because I am a witness, close up and personal, as we'll be talking about. But I put up this little joke to just show how far-reaching the Phoenix Lights has become. I mean, worldwide, people now are seeing similar phenomena, these orbs, information, or these massive triangle or V-shaped craft, and looking up and say, wow, there's the Phoenix Lights. And that's pretty cool. But it's not a joke. And that's one of the main reasons that I came forward personally as a medical doctor, as a scientist, as an experiencer, and as an educator for over 40 years. My background is adult and youth community education on the reality of vital health issues like AIDS, teen pregnancy, substance abuse. I started in '76 on NBC in Philadelphia, and continued with a syndication and NBC here in Phoenix, and then USA Cable, and started a company in '85 to try to wake up kids to the reality of different health issues like AIDS and teen pregnancy and substance abuse, which are currently being distributed by Discovery Education. And once this topic fell in my lap, and I knew nothing about this topic before, my husband, who's also a physician, and I had a very close sighting to our home 2 years prior to the mass sighting. And I captured 35mm photographs, which I'm going to show you in a sec. But as I said, this is not a joke. And that was one of the main reasons that I came forward after pushing my entire medical career aside, after thousands of people saw what I had been seeing, and wanted to get to the bottom of it, wanted to find a logical source and meaning for what I had witnessed and photographed. 20 years later, in March, I have not found it yet. What I did find really opened up a whole new world to me, and I'm going to be sharing some of that with you now. In fact, let's go to the next one. Okay. In fact, my data has become so important and so riveting that the top Chinese physicist and UFO expert Fan Jin came to Phoenix last year to meet with me, to see my data. And not only was he duly impressed with the 35mm that I had extensively researched and extensively analyzed at university and military level, but he also showed me pictures in China of the same exact phenomena. This is a worldwide phenomenon. We're going to talk about that today too. But as I mentioned, I'm going to get beyond the Phoenix Lights today as well. And we're going to be talking about how these phenomena really affect, at a very, very deep soul level, the experiencer. Again, my name is Dr. Lynne Kitei, pronounced like a key and a tie. And I urge you also to please, there is so much data involved with this, and we tried to make it simple and put it into the website form on the Phoenix Lights Network, which is www.thephoenixlights.net. There you're going to be seeing the pictures are up there on the photo page. There's news, TV news reports, as well as the GAP page. We're going to touch on that a little bit today. Geospatial animation project of the different craft that were seen on March 13th, 1997 during the mass sighting. But I share this with you because we have come such a long way. I mean, just with the Hubble and the Kepler telescopes in just the last few decades, now we know there are trillions of other galaxies along with ours. And each galaxy has their own stars with their own planets around those stars. And as we know, stars burst and actually send out stardust. We are made of stardust. And even astrobiologists won't admit that we're being visited here, but will say, I mean, they've coined the phrase panspermia. Doctors at Arizona State University, Paul Davids and others, he's postulating actually that we were seeded here from Mars. And when you know that, number one, our one galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy, is about 14 to 16 billion years old. Our solar system is a very young solar system. It's only 4 to 6 billion years old. So when you look at that picture, not only that in itself, okay, is poignant, but with all the other trillions of galaxies out there, and we know the building blocks of life are also out there. We know that oxygen and hydrogen and amino acids and living particles are out there. We're made of stardust. There are now scientists postulating that there could be sentient, intelligent beings out there billions of years ahead of us. Now, I'm going to come back to Earth so I can give you some points so you know from our vantage point. We live pretty high on a mountain in Paradise Valley. One window of our bedroom is, one wall of our bedroom is a window. So we see whatever pops up out there, and our view looks at, this is South Mountain, and these are important topography points because I'm going to be bringing them up consistently, because back here, a few miles back, is the Estrella mountain range, and they intersect at this point right here. Now, I put this picture on because this is a car coming down the road, and cars reflect their light onto the road. You're going to see that the unknowns, the true unknowns, don't reflect light. It's self-contained. That's why I call them an orb. You're also going to see in these pictures consistently these skylights in a house down the road. Now, we're also going to be talking a little later about coincidences. There are so many serendipities that happen, particularly after the mass sighting, and I really share them all in the book, but I'm going to share a few of them with you today. In fact, one of them, 6 months before the mass sighting, I was invited to the Gila Bend Indian Reservation, which is in the basin in between South Mountain, right here, and the Estrella mountain range. And they needed some help with their substance abuse problem, and I showed them my substance abuse program, and I got friendly with them. They usually don't talk to outsiders, but after the mass sighting, 6 months later, I noticed, as you'll see today, that many of these pictures showed that these phenomena were popping up right in that area where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. So I called them and I said, did anybody happen to see strange lights on March 13th? And they started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And they said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky people, light beings. That blew me away. It's part of their culture. I had no idea. That was the first I had heard of that. And I learned later that when I started to investigate this poignant point, that indigenous cultures worldwide believe that there are other intelligences visiting us. In fact, the Hopi right here in Arizona have protocols to invite them in. And they also said that the Estrellas, that's how it got its name. It means star in Spanish. And the Spaniards of the day either saw these orbs, these same phenomena, or actually heard the myths from centuries and named the Estrellas the Estrella mountain range. Also, they believed in that area that there is a portal or a gateway right there. And again, when you see my pictures, and I can't obviously be definitive, but over and over again, these phenomena keep popping up right in that area. They also showed me petroglyphs that were on South Mountain, and this was shot by a fella, Walren, that goes out into the mountains and finds these petroglyphs. But this one really, Jeff Waldron really caught my attention with this one, because these are in the same exact formation, 3 orbs in a pyramid or triangle formation that my husband and I saw right outside our bedroom window. Let me explain. Again, a little coincidence. It was the night before my birthday, and I was literally taking a bath in the other room, and my husband was at the window, that one wall that's a window, and anything that pops up out there. And we're used to seeing planes and helicopters and street lights and car lights and so forth. Well, he was on several medical and state boards. Nothing ever ruffles his feathers, and he sounded alarmed. He says, get over here quick. What the hell is that? And as I ran out of the shower, dripping wet with a towel, I noticed 3 amber orbs in a pyramid formation. Again, one on top and 2 closely aligned underneath. And it was like, what is that? And it was a little below us, actually, over a very treacherous desert landscape with cacti and all that behind a gated home. I mean, this is a gated community here. We're kind of nestled in the mountains, and absolutely zero chance that it was military. There's a no-fly zone. And I thought to myself, I wanted to get a picture of it, but anybody out there that's had an experience and a paranormal experience will know that you don't move. You try to take everything in. And I tried to take the shape, the color, the size, and so forth. They were about 3 to 6 feet each. They were oval shape, like an egg on its side. And the color within each orb, and again, I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge. They were self-contained. It was a uniform amber color throughout. And I noticed immediately that it didn't glare at all. Every other light out there glared. And I thought, if I don't get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe it. And I go running to the closet to grab my 35 millimeters that I keep handy for our beautiful sunsets here. I collect sunsets. And my husband calls me back. He says, get over here quick. One of them is disappearing. And as we watched, the top orb, without budging, started to implode very, very, very slowly. And I have to say that it was like shrinking very, very, very slowly, as if there was an intelligence behind it. It was mechanical. And even after it disappeared, it still felt like it was there. Where did it go? And I stepped out on the balcony, got a quick picture of the 2 lower orbs. And that is this picture right here. Again, these are the skylights on the house down the road. And we're going to talk about these lights a little bit later because this was analyzed. My first and last picture from this very close sighting was analyzed by Dr. Bruce Maccabee, Navy optical physicist, who came to a very, very stunning and riveting conclusion that he shared at the 1999 MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, symposium in Washington, D.C. But anyway, as I'm standing on the balcony, after I took this shot, I have to admit that as intently as I was watching these 2 lower orbs, it felt like something was watching me. And going through my head, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you. The next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to implode like the top one did. And I quickly shot a picture of that. That's the only thing I remember from that sighting. But I did get a shot of it. Here it is. I got one half disappeared, which is miraculous because I was using a Canon Instamatic camera, but I actually caught one half disappeared and one still there. But I didn't even know who to show it to. I knew nothing about this topic at all. I knew no one that was interested in it and wondered for 2 years what this advanced technology was doing outside our bedroom window. And being so busy with my business and with 2 young boys growing up, I never really looked into it. And then 2 years later, and I have to say I didn't see anything even remotely close. This was February 6, 1995. Fast forward to January of 1997, and I noticed 3 orbs in a line far west while I'm in the bedroom, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're in a line formation, they're totally equidistant from each other, they're amber, huge amber balls, they seemed strangely similar to 95, and I watched them each implode from right to left, and they were gone. Mentioned it briefly to my husband, and he blew it off. And the next night he was at a medical board meeting, and I'm at the window, the sliding glass door that's perpendicular to that big window, and I noticed the same 3 orbs are now in front of South Mountain. And I thought, okay, enough. I'm getting my video camera, and I ran downstairs, grabbed my camera, get out to the pool, get about 18 seconds worth, the battery goes dead, and it was charged. Okay, so I go in and I hook it up, I run outside again, they're gone. About a half hour later, my husband comes up the drive, and I walked outside and I said, honey, remember I told you about the 3 lights that were far west last night in a row? Well, about a half an hour ago, they were right in front of South Mountain. And as I'm pointing like this, they reappeared in the same spot. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to get a shot of this. And again, it was serendipitous that I had my video camera, which actually is not as good as 35 millimeter at all. In video, they look much smaller, they're white, they flicker, and 35 millimeter can be analyzed. So I ran upstairs, and I didn't know that at the time, but I grabbed my 35 millimeter, I got out on the balcony. Just as I'm ready to shoot the 3, suddenly 6 pop up on top of the 3. It was unnerving. I started to shake. And here's the first picture, and you can see it's wavy because I was shaking. I mean, not having an explanation for 95 with the closed sighting, and then having this massive span over a mile wide pop up at a distance, it was unnerving. I mean, is this a mothership? Is this a fleet? What's going on here? But I started clicking away. And the second picture is really, really important because it shows 5 lights in a V with 2 underneath. But what people described 2 months later during the mass sighting is 5 lights in a V formation with 2 trailing. Now, this was shot 2 months before the mass sighting. And as I'm capturing this phenomena head on, turning into a V shape, I'm clicking away. I thought, I've got to tell somebody this. I ran in, I called the Arizona Republic. I said, you got to get somebody out there quick. There's some strange lights in front of South Mountain. Please tell me what they are. By the time I finished my sentence, they were gone. Well, the next morning, I woke up and I thought there must be a logical explanation. So I called the Arizona Republic again to ask if anybody had called, and the operator said, no, nobody called. Well, I know I called. And I said, well, you know, it must be something. I mean, somebody's got to have to see this. It was massive. She said, well, sometimes they send off experimental maneuvers from Luke Air Force Base and they don't tell the public about it. And I figured, that sounds reasonable. And I called them up and I tried to be very professional. My husband and I are both physicians. We live mountainside in Paradise Valley, and we saw some strange lights in front of South Mountain last night. Can you tell me what they might have been? And from the get-go, she had an attitude. Well, they didn't come into Luke Air Force Base and they didn't come out from here, so we had nothing to do with it. And I said, well, be that as it may, we did see something. I did capture something on film. Who can I call? She said, well, you said it was near South Mountain, so maybe they saw something at the airport. I immediately called the airport, FAA, asked them if they had seen anything, and luckily there was a group of air traffic controllers that saw the same thing at the same time. One of them is a meteorologist, and he got on the phone, and he's a really low-key guy. I met him later, was very excited that I saw them too. He said, did you see the 3 lights that popped up at 8 o'clock, and then there were 6 lights at 8:30? I said, yes, that's why I'm calling. He said, they actually popped up over Class B restricted airspace. This is really important data because there's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport. Anyone that comes into that radius, particularly 1,000 feet altitude, must call into the tower, and no one did. So they got alarmed. They looked on radar, did not show up on radar. They took their binoculars to look, and in their own words, they said there were 6 points of light totally equidistant from each other, massive span over a mile wide, that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't quite see what it was attached to. And you would hear this again over and over again 2 months later. Some people just saw these orbs, these balls of light that seemed to be attached to something or had a force field in between holding them in rock solid equidistant formation or craft. But he mentioned that it turned against the wind, and he was a meteorologist, as a unit, then elevated slowly and moved behind South Mountain. So I said, so what was it? And there was silence. And then he said, beats me. I said, you're air traffic controller. You're supposed to know what's in your airspace. They had no idea what it was. They ruled out every earthly possibility, from flares to balloons to Chinese lanterns to even any conventional craft, or even skydivers with lights. And I kept in contact with them. I continued photographing these things up until and including March 13th. And I'll tell you much more about that night because there is so much detail. Whatever you've heard, if you haven't read my book, then you haven't heard the real details, because there is so much mis and disinformation out there. It's enough. It's enough with the ridicule and the snickering and the jokes. I mean, this is not funny. This is something really happened here. It is monumental. But what also happened was a transformation, as I mentioned at the top, not only with the witnesses, which we'll get to, but also with the media. And you'll see how Dateline NBC treated this. It really has been a positive transformation ever since 1997. So let me show you this. This will give you an introduction. By the way, there was no investigation, no explanation for months. There was nothing. After thousands of people saw a mile-wide either these orbs in a V formation or delta formation or boomerang formation glide right over their heads at 30 miles an hour. Some people saw it take off at tremendous speed without even displacing the air, totally silent. This is what was so eerie to so many people. This was so massive and at rooftop level and totally silent. Some people saw these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it. Incredible technology, to be sure. There is so much more to the story, but there was no investigation, no explanation. And even our former vice mayor, Councilwoman Frances Barwood, tried to just mention it, to raise the question in May. This was March 13th to May, and she was plastered by the media. I mean, there was so much ridicule and snickering at the time. And then it wasn't until the day after, June 18th, June 18th, from March to June 18th, nothing. And then a big spread, front page spread in USA Today, opened up our sighting to international scrutiny. We were deluged from media from all over the world. And they too, when they would talk to the witnesses, their descriptions were so detailed and so heartfelt. They were saying, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? The very next day, it's so interesting how this story unfolded. Our former Governor Fife Symington calls a press conference, an unscheduled press conference, to reveal the culprit of the lights over Phoenix. And people took it seriously. And you'll see what he did. And then you'll see what he did 10 years later in this very fine, professional TV report by NBC, Dateline NBC. Also, the former governor mentioned that there was hysteria. There was no hysteria with the witnesses and the experiencer. In fact, there has not been one, and we'll get into this, not one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the phenomenon known as the Phoenix Lights. To this day, 20 years later, the hysteria was within the government and the military when the front page USA Today article came out, but I'll let you see it for yourself.
Our next sighting even got a governor in on the act. He tried to make a joke of it at first, but ended up admitting that he just couldn't explain what he saw. But that didn't stop the military from trying. We have saved the best and one of the best known UFOs caught on tape for last. It is our #1 close encounter.
March 13th, 1997. Everyone was out under the night sky to get a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was passing over.
But there was something else passing over the sky that night as well.
It was awesome and amazing. It originally started out as 6 points of light in a mile-wide span. I grabbed the camera and I got outside. By the time I focused the camera, 3 had disappeared, and I caught the 3 above the city like a giant triangle.
What Dr. Lynne Kitei and thousands of others saw that night would become known as the Phoenix Lights, one of the most famous and well-documented UFO sightings ever.
The footage does not do it justice, okay? In the footage, they're much smaller, they're white. I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge, and the color within each orb was a uniform amber color throughout. It didn't glare at all. These were very mesmerizing, very soothing. And as I was watching these, I have to admit that it seemed that there was an intelligence looking back at me.
While Dr. Kitei saw lights moving in formation, others throughout the state reported seeing something even more otherworldly.
This very large delta-shaped craft flew 200-mile course and was witnessed by hundreds, if not thousands, of people.
It passed right in front of us. 5 lights that were a V.
You're not going to believe what I saw.
And he was amazed by what he heard.
We opened up a newspaper. You could not block out the object that we saw.
And these are very unambiguous, up-close sighting of a craft, not lights, not flares. This is the craft that flew directly overhead people. One of the kids I talked to said he could have hit it with a rock, it was so low.
Whoever did this wanted to be seen.
And they were seen by Dr. Kitei again and again and again, nearly a dozen times over the next decade. But after the initial mass sighting in 1997, everyone wanted to get to the bottom of those mysterious lights. Everyone, it seemed, except the authorities.
For months, there was no investigation. There was no explanation. They just blew it off.
But then Governor Fife Symington announced he would launch an investigation, and at an unscheduled press conference claimed authorities had uncovered the source of the Phoenix Lights. The public waited with bated breath for the governor to reveal the evidence. Okay, it turns out the investigation was really just the governor's idea of a joke. And the evidence, that's just his aide dressed up as an alien.
This almost hysterical environment that was building. I just decided that this is a great opportunity to go add some levity to the situation.
Who says you can't trust the government?
It really offended many, many, many people.
And Arizonans still did not have an explanation to the lights until
about a month later, the flare theory emerged.
The military revealed that on March 13th, a National Guard unit had been undergoing a training mission that involved the dropping of flares. Try telling one of the eyewitnesses that all they saw were military flares.
That's not what we witnessed or documented. I mean, flares cannot keep a formation. They drift with the wind, they float haphazardly, they have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself.
I'm not saying it's an alien spacecraft, but don't tell me it was a military flare, because that's an insult to everybody.
Speaking of insulting eyewitnesses, it turns out that the governor may not be as skeptical as he appeared at that press conference.
I met with Governor Fife-Symington. He said, you know what? I saw that thing too.
Wait, he what?
It clearly had a shape to it, and a big shape, and it was a constant shape. And you can't control flares that way. There's just no way they were flares.
So the ex-governor, who was also an ex-Air Force pilot, saw the craft that night in Phoenix, just like all the other eyewitnesses. But does his pedigree carry any clout with the skeptics?
Fife-Symington is an interesting case. Obviously, he's a thoughtful, intelligent man and a responsible person and a pilot, so he knows what he's looking at.
I think the fact that thousands of witnesses have come forward to date saying we saw this craft, I just don't think we can dismiss all that testimony.
I saw these things up close and personal, and no one can say that I didn't see what I saw. It cannot be explained or denied.
Again, well, what's really interesting is that when you not only look at this whole picture, that the former governor not only made a mockery of the mass sighting, which, by the way, really offended many, many people. People took it seriously. The press took it seriously. Witness took it seriously. That he really was going to talk about something of substance, and he comes marching out, one of his aides, in a giant alien head costume, especially parents who were with kids were very offended. And it's quite interesting that he did come forward 10 years later, bravely, to say that he saw one of the craft, and we're going to show one of these craft to you because that he might have seen, because there were 9 or 10 different craft. Again, whatever you've heard before, there is so much more to this story. First of all, the sightings, the mass sighting day, and besides the fact that it was seen for days before and weeks before, not only by myself, by others as well who were documenting them, but on March 13th, 1997, the mass sighting actually began at 3 p.m., daylight sightings. 5 o'clock hour, they were seen by Native Americans in New Mexico. 7 o'clock hour, they were seen by many people in California. And of course, the bulk of reports came in from 8 to 10 in Arizona, because that's when everybody was outside looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet, which is very interesting because it seems like whoever did this wanted to be seen and knew that people were looking skyward. But they continued on. Not only was there a report at 11 o'clock hour by 2 commercial airlines that were passing over Las Vegas. One of these mile-wide craft was hovering over Vegas, and their story is really poignant in and of itself. I share that in the book. And then at 3 a.m. the next morning, and these sightings continued. At 3 a.m. the next morning, there was a call to the National UFO Reporting Center, Peter Davenport, by an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base, who reported in great detail, and we have part of that in our internationally award-winning documentary, part of that recording, saying that jets were sent out from Luke Air Force Base to intercept and get gun camera film, which we heard they did, of one of these mile-wide craft hovering right in the center of Phoenix at 7th Avenue and Indian School. And as they got close, the lights dimmed, and then the whole craft blinked out. And the crewman said that he was one of the people to help one of the pilots out of his own aircraft because he was so shaken up by it. But these continued The last report, and this was told to me personally by a Boeing crewman, was at 5:30 that the whole crew, the Boeing crew, was coming into work at Sky Harbor International Airport and saw one of these mile-wide craft over his tarmac. Now, there was a 12-year study, compilation of thousands of reports from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, to Frances Barwood, Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, she got over 1,000, to Arizona MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, as well as Village Labs, which was a computer lab here that actually analyzed the videos and so forth, and they also got hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of reports. And after 12 years of compiling, if 2 or more people saw the same thing, then they were put into the study. There were 9 separate craft that people saw, and one came forward just last year, an additional one, so there were 10, a boomerang craft that covered Prescott, which I'm going to show you later. But the point is that whether it was one craft that could morph, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or a parade, which ultimately is what the investigators concluded after studying this data for 12 years, because even just here, between the 8 and 9 o'clock hour, there were multiple things happening at the same time. People were seeing orb formations as well as a different craft. And the different craft were very different, by the way. In fact, one of the triangle crafts separated in 2 and then shot up in the air. And if you look on the GAP page, GAP, the Geospatial Animation Project, on the Phoenix Lights Network website, you'll see them all, and they're also in the bonus features of our documentary DVD. But
this is a forensic recreation of the Sky Harbor Triangle that was first reported near Carefree around 8:15 and was last reported near Sky Harbor at 8:40 p.m. The path of the craft has been pieced together by combining reports of similar objects. We begin with a view from the intersection of Lone Pine and Scottsdale Roads, 2 miles away from the craft as it hovers 1,000 meters over Lone Pine and Pima. The craft, depicted as 2 miles wingtip to wingtip, proceeds east down Lone Pine Road. The view moves to the intersection of Jomax and Tatum Roads, 3 miles south of the next sighting at 8:26 p.m. at the intersection of Lone Pine and Cave Creek Road. At this point, the object began a heading change and turned to the south. At 8:28 p.m., a report from a material site on the East Cave Creek Road put the craft halfway through the turn. This view is to the west from a point above Jomax and Tatum, roughly 3 miles from the center of the craft. At 8:30 p.m., Max and Shala Saracen reported the craft near Crave Creek and Pinnacle Peak roads. This report included UFO occupants seen in the windows of a triangle which they described as at least 2 miles wide. At 8:35 p.m., the craft was observed from the intersection of North 32nd Street and East Shea Boulevard, proceeding south towards Squaw Peak, where it was last seen entering the Phoenix Metropolitan Valley. At 8:37 p.m., the craft was observed by Terry Mansfield and members of her hospice group on the south side of Squaw Peak. The next vantage point is the first publicly shown recreation of what then Governor Fife Symington would have seen as the object flew over Squaw Peak. At 8:40 p.m., the craft was reported from 36th Street in East Washington, where it hovered short of the northern edge of the airport perimeter. The final view is a recreation of what the tower crew would have seen had they been looking due north. Some reports have this craft departing directly vertically, a truly astounding conclusion to a truly astounding series of observations.
I wanted to share this. I wanted to share this with you because this shows just one of the craft, but it was so massive and so spectacular that I mean, it's been 20 years. We haven't seen anything that comes close to this technology. Not only the massiveness of it all, but also the fact, as I mentioned, that these craft could take off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. Some people saw the wings actually fold in and take off. As I mentioned with Luke Air Force Base, as they got close, it just disappeared. And some people even saw these orbs detach from the main object and go into the environment and redock with it later. Just incredible technology that in 20 years, we even had seen a hint of this. And you would think with all the precarious occurrences around the world, if we did have this technology, wouldn't it be great to be able to show our own prowess and technological advancement. Anyway, going further, as I mentioned previously, there were people that were seeing these things for days before. One of them was Steve Blonder. He was photographing these orbs, and when you look through a telescope, and some people did, I mean, they stayed in one spot without moving, and even the moon moves. These would just hover and look like spinning balls of energy. Also, what's interesting is that these videos that were taken, now keep in mind, because people ask me all the time, why didn't more people take pictures? Well, some people tried. Now, who carries around their camera? I happen to have mine in the corner because I have been documenting these things for weeks before. But number one, Kristen, who shot the boomerang, happened to be working on a new camera when this popped up. Steve Blonder, who captured these for days before, called MUFON to his balcony that night to see what he had been seeing for days, and actually they caught this arrowhead, this delta-shaped formation of orbs that cannot be denied. If you see the video, I mean, these orbs either are attached to something or have a force field in between, and these were 5 lights that cannot be denied. They were gigantic. My video of the 3 endpoints of a V or triangle, and I captured this off the video itself, have become very poignant, not only because they were also confirmed the next morning, because I called the air traffic controllers and they confirmed once again that a group that was there, and we had a briefing that I talk about in the book, that were there 2 months before, were also there on March 13th, and saw the same exact phenomena as I was photographing it in the same exact location over Class B restricted airspace, about 1,000 feet altitude. So that's confirmed by air traffic controllers that my data, and my video, by the way, is the only one that has been confirmed as a true unknown. But was really poignant as well is that I was contacted by an Orion constellation specialist, and Gary Davis, and he not only showed me that my video was very close to what the Orion's belt looks like, but that we also know that there are Earth artifacts all around the world that mimic Orion's belt, the Sumerian and Egyptian and Maya pyramids themselves. And then in mythology, it states that the gods descended from Orion and Sirius and initiated the human race. And those who came from the stars started civilization. Is it coincidental that my video just happens to look like the Orion belt? Well, Gary David actually took great lengths to measure the time and all the horizon and the azimuths and degrees and so forth, to show that as I was shooting the video, which was before 10 o'clock, and by the way, that's another important point, because my video and Steve Blonder's video, and where the MUFON people were also witnesses, was captured before 10 o'clock. The boomerang videos, and there are 2 of them, were shot after 10 o'clock, and that might be a very important point. But at this juncture, right before the news came on, they were giving a promo. It was about 10 of 10, quarter of 10, 10 of 10. He estimated that at 9:49, Orion's belt was directly above where I was shooting my video. Coincidence or connection? And this, again, is the boomerang video. And this video has been really the only one that has been badgered and tried to be discredited for being flares. And just recently, if we have time, I will show you a new study that confirms that it couldn't possibly be flares. And just the formation itself is really, really compelling. But what I want to show you now, once thousands of people had seen what I saw, I had to get to the bottom of this, and I pushed my whole medical career aside to really find a logical explanation, which again I have yet to find. But as I kept compiling data, more and more data, I started finding such incredible, credible material, one of which is NASA's been taking photographs of similar phenomena. I'm going to show you a TV report of that. Also, a month before the mass sighting, there was a couple that caught daylight footage of these orbs. And then the last one was a program that tried to totally discredit this boomerang video. In fact, they, as you'll find out, they did some strange things to the footage that really spoke to why are they doing that, to make the point that it was flares, because it was months later. I mean, after the USA Today article came out, and then Symington had his press conference, I called every military base, and I have some of their conversations in the book. They're very comical, actually. They were more curious in what I had and showing them, which I did not, than giving an explanation for it. They had no idea. They were just as curious. A month later, I get a call from the head of the Air National Guard, and she came to a very, very interesting conclusion. I'll tell you that after you watch these videos.
What you're about to see is amazing. It was taken from the Space Shuttle Columbia during a mission last December. So far, everything's normal. Then, the unknown objects start appearing. At higher speeds, look at what they do. They converge. And they form a triangle of light. The astronauts were sufficiently interested in these three objects that they went and zoomed in on them. Jim Delatoso thinks these objects are intelligent and could be related to the lights seen over Phoenix back in March.
New footage of those lights, and it's daytime video this time. Jim Schneebelt shows us the exclusive pictures and the story behind them.
More lights seen in the sky near Phoenix, but these lights appear in the daytime, about a month after the massive sighting over the city. This sighting shows two brightly lit objects hovering in the evening sky. One light blinks out, and another one appears, jumping around, while a third object tracks across the top of the screen at a very high rate of speed. Even UFO critics have a hard time explaining this sighting as bombing flares over the Barry Goldwater Range. For one thing, this sighting was made in the daytime when flares aren't used. And for another thing, this sighting was made in this direction toward the Estrella Mountains. But from here in Rainbow Valley, the Barry Goldwater Range is that way. The mystery of the lights was reignited by a one-hour TV special last week on the Discovery Channel. In that program, a California optics lab compares Kristen's nighttime video to the same scene taken during the daytime. Their result shows the lights above and beyond the mountains seeming to disappear as they fall out of sight over the bombing range, supporting the flare theory.
And he really stretched the imagination here to bring this thing in.
Kristen watched the program and questions it. He thinks the lights were lower and in front of the mountains. So we test the footage ourselves. It's a simple test using daytime and nighttime footage, both taken by Kristen using the same camera at the same location. We compare positions of the lights.
This is the first time I've seen this, and it didn't take long to do this at all. And just going from matching the shots up, going from one to the other, lights are in front of the mountain.
Why the discrepancy between our test and theirs?
He changed the positioning of these lights so that they would coincide with this peak over here.
He actually altered the footage?
How else could he do it? This light was always here, remember that?
If these are flares, are they over the bombing range? Or has the footage been altered? And by whom and why? The mystery continues.
Other sightings over Phoenix earlier that night also remain unexplained.
What I was going to share before, now first of all, if you look at this was the original footage. There was a light here, and this really gave it away when it was analyzed after this Discovery program, which also played on Travel Channel. It was Anatomy of a Sighting, and they really, they beat it with showing it over Thanksgiving weekend, over the Christmas holiday. They really wanted this out there, that it was flares, and people fed right into it. People were looking for a logical explanation. I get that. I'm a healthy skeptic myself, but when you look at the data, here's the boomerang being formed. There was one lone light over here. It's very interesting that was there in the original footage, but in the program it was over here. So you can see where this may be altered to conform to the mountain. judge for yourself. But anyway, I got a call from the Air National Guard, one of the heads of PR, and she says, "Oh, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March." And I was thrilled. I said, "You do?" Because I was looking for any logical explanation. She says, "Would you believe that nobody ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard? And the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares in Operation Snowbird, which I later found out meant in military terms diversionary tactical maneuvers." And she said, "That must be what some people saw." And I said, "Now, wait a minute. When was the Maryland Air National Guard in town?" She said, "March 1st to the 15th. I said, "Were they in town in January?" She said, "Oh, no." I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Well, I happen to have photographs, 35mm photographs, they're in the negative, of the same phenomena in the same location 2 months before the mass sighting as during the mass sighting, confirmed in both instances by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport the very next morning as hovering over Class B restricted airspace at 1,000 feet altitude." And she says, "You never told me that." And then I said, "Well, wait a minute, besides that, you're trying to tell me that flares," and by then I had learned that flares cannot, keep information, that they drift and drop with the wind, have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself and illuminate the area around it, which not one witness to the mass sighting described traverse the entire state in a rock-solid, equidistantly spaced, mile-wide V formation for hours. And she says, "I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you." Well, I'm still waiting. Anyway, just to really extinguish the flare theory once and for all, this is my 35mm photograph of what people described during the mass sighting, but 2 months prior. Here's the boomerang. These are flares. I mean, it can't be denied. By the way, 2 years later, the former Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Frances Barr, which was running on a platform 3 years later to get answers as Secretary of State. She was running for Secretary of State to get answers for the lights over Phoenix, for the Phoenix lights, and asking for a reenactment. Actually, all of us were. I mean, look, myself, I knew I had pictures from before the mass sighting, and I also was taking pictures after the mass sighting, and during the mass sighting of the same exact phenomena appearing in the same exact location. Hey, if it was them, shame on them for denying it for months and going over people's heads at rooftop level and so forth, even a public safety issue. But hey, if they can reenact it, I'm a show me person, do it again. Well, finally, 3 years later, right before the third anniversary, on March the 7th, we got an announcement that 3 National Guards were coming into town, New York, Michigan, and California, to show everyone the Phoenix lights. You decide.
3 years after the 1997 sighting, the Arizona Air National Guard staged this demonstration, saying the lights were military flares.
We all got calls asking where our aircraft were that night, and we all checked, and none of our aircraft were in that area. But as we looked onward a couple months later, we found out we had visiting aircraft.
But the demonstration didn't settle the debate.
And I have to say that it just didn't make it. For anyone that had seen the true mass sighting, it was a joke.
Flares like these put off smoke, and witnesses say there was no smoke associated with what they saw. So now, more than a decade later, the lights remain a mystery, but one that Kitei says deserves a closer look.
So the data speaks for itself. I just urge people to look at the data, and that's one of the main reasons I came forward. If I can be a credible voice so that people actually look at the data, then I've done my job.
But there is so much more to the story. I mean, the history of these phenomena that I had no idea, and it blew me away from the time of primitive drawings. Prehistoric animals are etched in caves in Peru and Pakistan, and here there is a UFO in the sky that we would say is a UFO today, or even a helmeted man that's coming out of a UFO. I mean, it's just amazing when you look at Sumerian writings, Indian writings, even the Bible, Ezekiel's wheel, and so forth, that are references at the time to what would be UFOs. And then you fast forward 15th and 16th centuries to frescoes and pictures with people on the ground looking up at UFOs with beings in the UFOs, as well as 100 years before our mass sighting, actually in 1897 in Kansas, California, Washington, and Canada, there were reports of a massive airship with removable lights. Sound familiar? That was 6 years before the Wright brothers took flight. And then we have what they called Foo Fighters, these orbs around each ship during the World War II. And each country thought somebody else had this spy technology. It wasn't until after the war that everybody found out that no one does. And we have a 93-year-old French pilot that actually saw these and reported them. That's in our documentary bonus features. And then we come to the flaps, the Lubbock Lights in the 50s and the 80s and 90s. We have Belgium. We have, who by the way is a model for what should happen, because they join forces with the civilians and university and scientists and military to find out what's going on, to investigate these things. That's what should happen. And of course we have UK and on and on, and the Stephenville sightings as well. But one of the sightings that really caught my attention was 1 month before the Arizona mass sighting. And again, it was more far-reaching than that, but we have the mass sighting on March 13th, 1997. A month before, in February, there was another mass sighting. But this one was in St. Petersburg, Russia, and a couple of people got video. And what blew me away is that this video is of a craft that each light had 3 lights on it. And why that caught my attention? Because one of the craft that was actually illustrated by Larry Lowe and described by many witnesses that traversed the entire state and beyond also had, each light had 3 lights in it. Here's another video that was captured during the St. Petersburg 1997, February 1997 sighting. And by the way, there were air traffic controllers during that sighting as well that reported that these craft were right over their tarmac. This one blew me away, not only because one of the other craft that is illustrated on the GAP page, GAP, in the Geospatial Animation Project on the Phoenix Lights Network website, also I caught on video in 2005. Coincidence? And I always say, keep looking up. Now I'm going to get to really some very interesting and riveting data that most people aren't aware of. Not only the hard data, which I just showed you is really important, but the fact that when I say keep looking up, it's really a double entendre. Not only to look up in the sky, certainly, but while I was interviewing witnesses, there were a number of witnesses that shared with me that they also had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting. And I found that really poignant because I did too. And we won't have time today, maybe another webinar, I'll get into that to describe it, but I do describe it in detail. Changed my life forever at 8 years old, way behind my years as an 8-year-old after that. But nonetheless, I started thinking, my goodness, could there possibly be a connection between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body experience, or unexplained aerial phenomena that has a mystical light associated with the experience? And lo and behold, I started finding such credible data at university level. The Omega Project at the University of Connecticut, it's like 4 inches thick, by Dr. Kenneth Ring, and of course Whitley Strieber and Dr. John Mack at Harvard were forming the same opinion, and in their studying that there is indeed a transformation. I started calling all unexplained phenomena ups because they are an up, a positive transformation after someone experiences an up experience psychologically, in the media. Well, I'm going to describe that as well, and educationally, and certainly psychologically in real time. What's really interesting, 6 months before the mass sighting, the movie Independence Day was real popular, and we delve into this in the documentary, that I mean, we have been so inundated with fear, and threat, that as Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's the head of the Consciousness Study Department at the University of Arizona, states in the documentary, if you're inundated with something that's fearful, and then you see that something, how do you think you're going to react? And I have to say, the children that saw this mile-wide V coming towards them were initially scared. They started jumping up, Independence Day, Independence Day. But as it came closer, a calmness came over everyone, not only children, but adults as well, a connectiveness to the phenomena, an awakening. Again, not one person in 20 years has described harm, threat, or fear associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. And quite the contrary, a connectiveness, a positive transformation, even over time, not only in real time, but also long term. We have witnesses to the Phoenix Lights that have shared with me that they are now so much more aware of our environment, that some of them went into the peace movement, environmental movement. Some changed their eating habits, won't eat meat anymore. And then certainly the media, as I shared with you, Dateline, and the media is in small steps coming around. I mean, this has been happening for a good 50, 60 years, but now more than ever with social media and being able to share these phenomena and a split second after you see them, the local media, and I have to say this, and Arizona has really been transformed. When I came forward in 2004, it was very interesting because I had done medical communications work at NBC here in Phoenix, and many of the people in the early 80s that I worked with were just starting out. And when I came forward in 2004, now one was the head of the news department at Fox and the head of production at CBS and so forth. And the Village Labs used to call the person that had the picture Dr. X. So when I came forward after 7 years of anonymity, and there were very few people that knew who had these pictures, they said, "Oh, you're Dr. X, well, come on over." And they have been so kind and so credible. They don't laugh. It's not a joke. It's not, they're really a model for what should happen. They take sightings seriously, and there have been sightings here that have been weather balloons or have been flares. And we show people. Right before the 10th anniversary, they sent out a line of flares. And I said, this is such a great opportunity because so many people were calling, what are these lights in a line? Well, they weren't really in a line. If you really look at them, they were drifting and dropping. And we taught the public the difference between the true unknowns and flares. And here is one report that not only you're going to see how credible the media has taken this, but also how it affected the witnesses.
This is the way the lights looked over Phoenix at about 10 o'clock last night.
She came in the house and she said, "Mom, you've got to run out and see what's over Camelback Mountain."
March 13th, 1997. Sue Watson joined her 2 daughters and 2 sons in the front yard of their Phoenix home just south of Camelback Mountain.
We came right in the front yard and we saw this huge aircraft coming over, probably covered half the mountain.
What they saw was eerily similar to this animation of a boomerang-shaped aircraft described to investigators that night.
The kids, I go, this is beautiful. I mean, we're going to know later what this is because, you know, it's big. When you cover that much of Camelback Mountain, it's big.
This is the picture Sue and her children drew after watching the craft float silently over their home.
I saw the big one.
And according to Sue, this couldn't be flares or balloons.
Oh, no, no, no. Oh, no, we literally up in the sky. And it was almost like the boys were waiting. The structure was beautiful. It was like a mall. It's like a huge mall floating over your house.
There are actually 8 or 9 different craft that people saw.
Dr. Lynne Kitei, a Phoenix physician, waited 7 years to reveal what she saw that night.
I have no idea what they were, but I know that they were.
And soon, Kitei was sharing what she learned after interviewing hundreds of witnesses.
It wasn't 1 or 2 events. There were many events over many, many hours.
The first images of their kind, based on an actual UFO sighting. The massive UFO comes to life.
The Phoenix Lights became famous world over. In 2010, they were the subject of this National Geographic documentary.
March 13th, 1997.
What have we got here?
On this one night, hundreds of alarmed residents reported unexplained objects and lights in the night sky.
Eyewitnesses reported lights from unidentified aircraft moving south along a 300-mile-long stretch from Nevada to Tucson.
At the time in 1997, the vast majority of the media and throughout the community would snicker and laugh, oh yes, right, sure. But that's not happening anymore.
Kitei has written a book about what happened that night, and she has produced a documentary that's shown every year about this time at a Harkins Theater in Scottsdale.
I felt it was too compelling, too important not to share, and let people decide for themselves. The data speaks for itself.
What I remember is it being right above. It was above Camelback, yes. But it was maybe right over here.
Kevin Watson was with his mother, brother, and sisters that night too.
It was huge. It was silent. It was very stealthy.
And according to Kevin and Sue Watson, it wasn't flares or balloons.
When we looked at it, there were no stars in the shape.
You know what? We saw what we saw, and we know what we saw. We did not see 10,000 balloons connected. We saw a structure with actual structure lit up underneath, illuminated like yellowish. And you know what you see when you see it. Don't tell me what I saw.
Like you said, it's etched in our minds forever.
Oh yeah, it will forever be up there.
And that's the truth. I mean, people had such a life-changing experience. And when you talk about an up, an up is really a connection between all unexplained phenomena and between all of us. We know the entanglement theory talks about subatomic research that shows the interconnection of everything, a universal oneness. And human beings have been talking about atonement. I call it at-one-ment, and the Phoenix Lights are part of that. And the up experience really makes us not only connected to the experience itself and to the phenomena, but a feeling of being connected to the universe and to our planet and to each other very, very strongly. In fact, I apologize, I've been fighting a cold and I'm getting a little hoarse now, but just let me illustrate here, just the connection between near-death experience and UFO connection is so similar. The experience itself, and certainly the after effect, the positive transformation, but the experience itself, and I lay it out very simply in the book, but mystical light associated with the experience, an out-of-body state, feeling that you're in another time and space, as I did when I went out on the balcony, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Timelessness, seeing light beings, as I did in my own near-death experience. Actually, I saw beings in glowing white robes above the earth, similar to what people describe worldwide in ancient writings as the Watchers. Telepathy, people that were witnesses to the Phoenix Lights had telepathic messages sent to them, and I experienced a oneness in their experience. And when people have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, many times they're told that they have to go back, even though they feel that they were coming home. But when they come back, they have a certain knowledge and a knowing that everything is connected and that we're not alone in the universe. So just to sum up, we have that positive transformation. The person that comes back, and I'm just the perfect example of it, embraces life to the fullest. If you look at my bio, I've done a lot of stuff. In fact, I was, besides being on Broadway and national touring companies with giant stars and understudying Barbara Eden in Sound of Music, and I thought that's the reason I came back. I also played the part of the mother in Raising Arizona with Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter and John Goodman and Frances McDormand. And there is a reference, I won't ruin it for you, a reference to my character 10 years before the mass sighting and UFOs by the Coen brothers. Anyway, a sense of urgency to wake people up, as I have tried to do, to wake people up to what's really happening and to our Earth and what's important here while we're on Earth. And also a belief that love and knowledge are the only things that you take with you. And I'm going to give you something to take with you today. 3 things that I came out with after my near-death experience that I treasure every single day is awareness, being awake. When something comes before you, when a person that you meet, to me, it's there for a reason, and I try to take advantage of it. Or do you blow it off? Just be aware, be awake. Attitude, positive attitude, and I've seen it in medicine. Positive and negative attitudes really affect our bodies, our minds, and everyone around us. It's like a pebble being thrown into a pond. It is very far-reaching. And think positively, you're going to attract positive things. And also giving out positivity sends out that positive energy. I have to say, and again, I've seen it in medicine where people are negative and they draw that negative to them. Appreciation, the old adage, a man cried because he had no shoes until he saw someone who had no feet. And when you really think about it and appreciate every day, and in fact, at the end of the day, I write down what I appreciate from that day, whether it's a person you speak with or just appreciate the earth. I mean, I asked Jim Delatoso, one of the major investigators, why do they visit here? And his answer was, because it's a vacation planet, which may sound funny, but our planet is so beautiful. And really is so rich in so many ways, to be able to just appreciate each flower and cloud and just appreciate the life that we do have and the gifts that we've been given. I do go into much more of this in the book, so I hope that you'll take the opportunity to check that out. But now I'm going to go into, because with the time we have left, again, coincidence or connection. And again, I don't believe that there are any coincidences. They're the anonymous gift from beyond. And one of the first, again, I collect sunsets. And in this particular...
Dr. Lynne, I just wanted to tell you, you have about 30 minutes left, so there's no rush.
Oh, good. Okay, that sounds terrific. Thank you so much. Give me a heads up when I have about 5.
You got it. Okay.
And I apologize for my voice. I didn't know if it was going to hold up today. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you want to take a break and grab some water or something, we can do that.
I'm okay. I have something here. I just want to...
You got it. Then the floor is yours.
I want to get this out for you guys. At any rate, I had about 5 rolls of film, November and December in 2000, and I noticed when I got the pictures back in the negative, right here. This was in November, and this was in December, was the same rod-shaped object in the same space. This is the same exact location. So I had these analyzed, and as you can see, there's like 2 little things coming out the side here. I mean, this is not a bug. This is something real, and it's huge. And what was postulated is either this is a side view of one of the craft, or maybe even its own craft, a cylindrical craft, which, by the way, many people, particularly on the Navajo Nation, and we have Arizona Navajo Rangers, law enforcement, who are studying these phenomena. They actually speak at our event. Every year we put on an event at the Scottsdale Harkin Shea Theater, and we show our internationally award-winning documentary, which we're so proud, and then afterwards we have them speak. And it's riveting to hear the stories that they tell, but they do speak of these rod-shaped, massive rod-shaped craft that appear there and have orbs or craft coming out of it. Even in the Superstition Mountains here also have these rod-shaped objects over the mountain there. Well, this particular one, let me give you a preface of this. 1 year later, after the 9/11 attacks, which, I mean, really devastated so many, our consciousness was really shocked and jolted. And about a month later, I'm watching the news, and we're talking about the new anthrax scare and also nuclear possibilities. It was really a scary time, and I hadn't seen the lights since actually '98. The lights came back, but I haven't seen them since then, and this is 2001, and I'm thinking, you know, where are you? Do you know what happened here? I was really heartfelt looking out the window and thinking, you know, if you're real, why haven't you shown yourselves? And I'm talking in a beat. There they were. Now, I would like somebody to tell me, and this is in the same spot again, I would like somebody to tell me what that is. And that's my favorite picture, because that cannot be denied. In fact, on our homepage, on our website, if you scroll to the bottom, there is a picture that was shown from Colonel Stevens' collection at the anthropology exhibit at ASU, along with my pictures, and they put his picture of a 50s shot, a daylight shot of discs, right next to this, and they're almost identical, and we morph that shot, the daylight shot, into this shot at the bottom of the page if you want to take a peek at that at the phoenixlights.net website. About a year later, our son was home. Now, Dan, who is now a neurologist, was in medical school at the time, and down in Tucson, and he came up for one night a month to go to classes or have testing the next day here in Phoenix. And we were watching TV, and they were talking about this new crop circle. And I don't like to really put anything out there of what these other intelligences might look like, because I don't know. You know, I mentioned I don't know what they are. I don't know where they're from. All I know is that they are. And it's time we get this topic out in the open. We address it, we accept it, and we study it so we can move forward and not only find out who's driving these things, but also move forward in our own evolution. But at any rate, this crop circle was formed, and it was interesting because they were talking about, it was Jim Delatoso, one of the investigators here, was talking about the binary message that was in this orb or disc that was in the crop circle itself. And the message said, beware the bearers of false gifts and broken promises, much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. The conduit is closing. And my son says, why can't I see the Phoenix Lights? Now, he was the only one that read my 750-page journal, which I actually had compiled after I pushed my whole medical career aside for 7 years, and I meticulously, every day, wrote down everything that I could find, from the history to witnesses to military, anything that I could find, and ended up with a 750-page journal that inevitably, after much soul searching, I must say, because I did not want to come forward, but as an educator, as a scientist, as an experiencer, as a physician, to let people know they're not alone, they're not crazy, how could I not come forward with this material? I squeezed it down to 250 pages and finally came forward in 2004, but Dan was the only one that read the 750-page journal, and I asked him, I said, what am I supposed to do with this? And he looked at me, he said, Mom, you've got to come forward. This is too important not to share. And everything you've done has led up to this. And I have to say, from the mouth of babes, I kind of knew what to do with what I had, and which has brought me here to you today. But as he was watching this television program, he turns to my husband and I, and he says, I wish I could see the Phoenix Lights. And I knew it was so heartfelt. And I, too, was looking out at the sky thinking, why can't Dan see this? Why, you know, if anybody would appreciate it, he would. And not just one or two, but if there's three, what could that be? And as soon as that report finished, there they were. Again, here's the skylights in the same spot where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. And I have to say that both my husband and Dan ran outside, and I grabbed my camera and went out there, and it was comical. I mean, on the video, you can hear them, oh my God, what is that? And Dan tried to do a differential diagnosis. It's not flares, it's not balloons, it's not planes. It was really exciting to see them excited. And he came back, another coincidence, a year later in 2003, for one night to study for a test that he had the next day. And my husband was asleep already. He came upstairs about 11:30 at night, and we went out on the balcony. And that day, we had put down our prize German Shepherd, who he grew up with. And it was really devastating for the family. And we were hugging each other and crying. And Dan says, "Mom, look." And we look up. And there they were. And he whispers in my ear, "Mom, they're here to comfort you." And I get choked up every time because I have to say, coincidence or not, it was really comforting. And again, this is in the same spot. Well, anyway, I was speaking in Italy, March 25th, 2006. Another little coincidence, that was the day of my mom's passing, March 25th. And I happened to see Jaime Musan, who had a very in-depth conversation with me that I share in my book, was speaking along with me, and he was showing the same crop circle that Dan had seen when he saw his first sighting. So I thought, that would be cool, let me take a picture. And I took a picture of it, and I checked it to make sure that I got the picture, and I noticed that there was an orb here that looked very similar to this orb. But what was interesting when we had it analyzed, not only does it look like there's a binary message in there, and it also is dissected in the middle, as this one is, and if anybody out there knows binary code, maybe they could analyze this. But what really caught my attention, which never did before, call it another coincidence, but an important one, is that in the original picture, there's the same three orbs in a line, equidistant line, that I caught on video during the March 13th, 1997 Arizona mass sighting. Coincidence or connection? And this was the most recent that I actually took a picture of. I have seen some before, and certainly they're happening worldwide, but I'm sharing this one with you because not only was this poignant, again, in the same location, but that when I looked at the photographs, and I took several of them, and I hope you can see this, right here is an orb, and you can see the tail. It's actually moving. I mean, I actually caught an orb moving in front of the camera, because the next shot, it's not there. And again, here's the shot, and then the next shot, it's not there. But there is much more to the story. And this really gets into the nitty-gritty of something that I didn't share till the latest edition of the book came out in 2010. I couldn't wrap my head around it, and it was just so out there that I kept it private. But I decided to share it at this point because, first of all, time as we see it is primitive. Past, present, and future is our concept of time. And maybe this data will open the door a little more if scientists actually look at it and show us that time really isn't what we think. Also, and let me show you here. Now, here's the first and the last picture from 1995. Again, here's the first picture of the two bottom orbs. Here's the last picture. Now, not only did Dr. Maccabee, who I sent this picture to as an afterthought, you'll see in the documentary that we had a sighting in 1998 where four of us, north, south, east, and west, I had alerted them that I had seen the faint orbs through a fog, which is really eerie here. It doesn't happen in Phoenix. I mean, the humidity is usually 10, okay? But that weekend preceding this sighting was a dense fog. You couldn't even see beyond our street. My husband would joke that they could be there watching us and we don't see them. But nonetheless, it was a unbelievable sighting of straight lines, mirror images. The final thing was a giant triangle that four of us captured. And I thought, wow, that's great at the same exact time, unlike March 13th, which, as I mentioned, a couple of us videotaped very different video before the mass sighting, and the boomerangs were after mass sighting. And it's also interesting to note that that's exactly what people were seeing, okay? They were seeing the V, the triangle, the delta shape, the boomerangs, and that's exactly what we captured around 10 o'clock on video. But nonetheless, now we had, at the same time, four different people, north, south, east, and west, that Dr. Bruce Maccabee, Navy optical physicist, could analyze. Also, as an afterthought, I stuck in the first and last picture of the 95 sighting, the close sighting, and he called me a couple weeks later, and he said, "You said that sighting was only a couple minutes." I said, "Right." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "That's what I remember." He said, "Ask your husband." Interestingly, now I was outside, he was inside when I was taking the pictures. He wouldn't talk about it. he would get a little agitated when I would bring it up, so I didn't. And he said, you have to confirm, which I did. And he just confirmed, yeah, 2, 3, 4 minutes long. And when I said that to Dr. McAfee, he said, that's impossible. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, first of all, these did move, okay? Also, he saw the same exact phenomena, and he tested these in the same exact location. Again, here are these skylights disappearing while we were seeing the close orb. So you speculate that there were 6 across, as I saw 2 months before the mass sighting and during the mass sighting. And as these were disappearing, so were these. But he said, but that's not even the most important point. I said, okay. He said, and I would have never noticed this in a zillion years. He said, there are many lights on in the first picture, groups of lights that are off in the last picture. I said, okay. He said, that doesn't happen in a couple minutes. He said, I want you to do an experiment. He was so meticulous with this. He even took those pictures to show what groups of lights were on in the first picture and off in the last picture. And he did it again a couple of years ago for the National Geographic program, and with better technology, and found even more groups of lights in the first picture that are off in the last picture. He said, I want you to go out in the balcony, stand approximately at the same spot, look out and take pictures of the skyline every 15 minutes, and we'll see when the lights start going out. Well, I usually take a bath when I'm home between 7 and 8. My husband called me out of the bath originally, so let's be conservative and say 8 o'clock for the starting point. Well, the lights start going out at 9. The last picture is indicative of 10:30, 11. And he asked me, can I present this case at the upcoming 1999 MUFON International Symposium in Washington, D.C.? I said, hey, this is your baby, Dr. McAfee. I would have never noticed this data. Just keep my name out of it. Please keep me anonymous, which he gratefully did. And he presented the case in 1999. His conclusion was that there were hours between the first and last picture, not minutes. And it's the first authenticated photographic evidence ever, and as far as we know, ever, of missing time. Now, again, the reason I'm sharing this is hopefully science will take a peek at it, and it can open that door to show that time isn't really what our concept of time, but also quantum physics and quantum mechanics has come such a long way with the string theory and bubble theory, that there are 10 or 11 different dimensions out there. Well, if there's other times and spaces along with R, then why is it such a leap to think that there might not be other intelligences in those other times and spaces that we get glimpses of if we're open to them or invited? And that's why I'm sharing this data now. And I hope that it will be impactful. It's out there now. I don't believe in coincidence anymore. So it is what it is, and people can decide for themselves. And as Dr. McAfee said, perhaps the most important result of the Phoenix sightings is that they turned Dr. Kitei on to do things, the book, the documentary, so forth. And I'm now working on a curriculum for kids that she never would have done if this hadn't happened. And I have to say that's the truth. I would have never done this in a zillion years. But the most important thing is that I am a messenger. And there is an important message that not only I impart, and that was imparted to me, which I'm going to share with you shortly, but there's other people worldwide that are getting messages, and I'm so grateful for them as well coming forward. And I was contacted by a fellow who's a truck driver in Sedona, and I get emails all the time, and I welcome them. I say in the documentary, and I mean this wholeheartedly, even if you just share with one person, it's healing. When somebody keeps a paranormal experience, even though most experiences and anomalous experiences can be explained, only a very small percentage cannot. But just because we can't define them yet definitively, it doesn't mean they're not real. We may be looking on the AM dial for an FM frequency, but when someone has a paranormal experience, it's real to them. And if they don't share it, it festers. It's not healthy. So even if you just share with me, go on the website, contact me, or go on Facebook, Phoenix Lights Network page, message me. I take confidentiality very seriously as a physician. even if you just share it with one person, it's cathartic, it's healing. And this person happened to share his illustrations with me, that he was getting these messages, and he needed to share them. He was told to share them with me, and he sent me this one picture, and I'll read real briefly. I hope we have time for this. Hello, Dr. Kitei. I recently purchased your Phoenix Lights film and was very excited and impressed by you and the rest of the cast. In December of 1996, I began receiving images and information from various off-planet visitors in the Arizona area. As I was watching your film for the first time, I heard faint audio sounds in my left ear as I was looking at your photographs. After viewing it multiple times, I began receiving transmissions from it. One of them is a transmission directly to you. This transmission are multi-dimensional interplanetary Federation broadcasts. Now, I don't know if anybody out there believes in the Galactic Federation, but this is what he was sharing with me, and are always repeating themselves every 15 minutes since the original transmission date in 1995. These patterns were left here on the ethereal level for all individuals involved and can be accessed through meditation or through direct contact. And by the way, I give ways in my book, 10 ways to connect to these other phenomena, to these intelligences if you choose. And he goes on, which is how I receive them. The hand-drawn codes are written in a universal, multidimensional telepathic language, which is understood by every living being, including animals. The broadcast is direct transmission from the Interplanetary Alliance to you. One of the primary contactees and ambassadors in the Southwest area, and he talked about my former rank and involvement and whatever. Also, all who saw the craft and those who, like me, who will receive remote communications from it, were destined to see it, or should I say contacted on some level to be part of this amazing experience. Anyway, I thought you might be interested in the images, as it will add another dimension to your work and understanding. Thanks, Brian. Well, he had no motives, no ulterior motives. I look at this and I thought, geez, this kind of looks like a crop circle. So I contacted Chet Snow in Sedona, who is a crop circle specialist, as well as Colin Andrews, a UK crop circle specialist. And almost simultaneously, they emailed me so excited. Oh my goodness, Brian DeFlores is famous and he's wonderful and he's amazing. He closes his eyes and gets these messages, and with pens in his hand, he starts drawing these incredibly complex illustrations. But what was really amazing is that Chet happened to be in UK a couple of weeks later, and after he had first sent this to me, and he sent me these pictures. He actually walked in these crop circles that were formed 3 weeks after I received my first communication from Brian, which is pretty amazing. And Colin Andrews spoke with me at Dr. Stephen Greer's conference a couple years ago. And while he's telling me that these orbs appear over crops before the crop circle is made, and someone took a picture, and there is an orb. Coincidence? We are masters of our own universe, and we have free will, as I have, to do this curriculum I'm working on for kids, or documentary, which has won over 12 International Film Festival awards, and the book, which has a message that sent me on the journey to try to find out what it meant that has brought me here to you. And I hope, as the Phoenix Lights touch one person at a time, I hope that this presentation today, when you look up in the sky and you see all the wondrous possibilities out there, all the wondrous positive possibilities out there, that you too will think of the Phoenix Lights, and it has touched you, and that you'll keep looking up. Thank you so much for letting me share this with you today. And if you'd like me to answer some questions, again, I apologize. I have been fighting this infection, and the show must go on. So I wanted to make sure that I got this out there for you today. So thank you for.
Yes, you're a trooper, Dr. Lynne. Thank you. You're definitely a trooper.